So 5 watts doesn't sound like a lot, does it? And I always wonder, can these little amps really knock your socks off? Okay, I think it's safe to say that this 5 watt amp punches above its weight. Yeah, it can blow your socks off if you want it to. But I guess I want to know, how does it also do with cleans? How does it take pedals? Is it quiet enough to play at home? That's what we're going to find out in this video. You can figure out then, is it the right amp for you? Okay, before we start with the clean tones, I just wanted to say thanks to any new subs that followed from my vintage guitar video, if you're watching this one. And to all of you who watched it, yeah, it's caused a bit of controversy, I see, but, but basically, yeah, that was a lot of fun. And the follow-up will be coming in just under a week. I still have to go back to the shop to, well, carry on with that. So yeah, hang on tight for that one. And if you haven't seen that video, after you've watched this one, you can go back to my last video where I went to a great vintage guitar shop to try out some pretty epic old guitars. Also, just a sneak peek, but if you're a fan of Carr amps, next week I will be opening this box, there's the Trail Rider, and discovering, well, what this is. I think it's a Skylark Special, but it's another amp that Coda are lending me, and I think I've tried this one in the shop, really liked it, and I want to compare it to my Bartel Starwood. So if you want to see what that amp is and how it sounds and how it compares to one of my favourite ever amps, then yeah, that will come out in a week or two. Subscribe to the channel to make sure you see it come out. So I won't lie. I mean, and you can probably tell that, you know, playing really clean is not the thing I do the most. So you know, generally I sort of dread the part of an amp review where I'm going to do a really clean tone, because it just will not show you off to your best. But I have to say, as far as you know, cleans go, I really enjoyed this one. You know, being a smaller amp, it probably is just nearer its point where, you know, some sort of gain comes in, I guess. So you get a bit of sustain and a bit of, I don't know, that juice, let's call it. You know, you hit the note, you feel like you've squeezed a bit of juice. That's how I can put it. Now, in the first video I did about this amp, I did explain sort of what the amp is about. But I will go into detail about that a little bit later in the video. But just for now, what I would say is that was in its tweed mode. And it's a little bit sort of flat in a way, the EQ. So I then wanted to try it in the V mode, which is the top boost, or, well, they never mention it explicitly, but top boost, Vox. It's in the Vox mode. So let's hear that. So I have to say, I enjoyed playing the Clean on that V mode more than on the T mode. And I think it's just the way you get a bit of extra brightness and chime, a little bit of scoop. Although it says in the manual, when the bass and treble controls are in the middle, there's not as much difference between the two channels. That difference appears, as you move those controls, which we will do in this video. I'd still say as I flicked it over to the V there, I just felt a bit more life in it. But overall, it's really dynamic, isn't it? The way it sort of interacts with the reverb, and the way if I hit it harder, it does do a big sort of splash. It's a bit closer to hitting that sort of edge of breakup a little bit. So overall, as cleans go on any amp, I've really enjoyed this one. And because it is a small amp in wattage terms, but it's not a tiny cabinet and it has a 12-inch speaker, you do get that feeling that you're filling the room a little bit. Not as much as a 2x12 or even a 1x12 cabinet with a 35 watt amp, obviously, because on those the bass is way more exaggerated and everything just feels bigger. But this didn't feel like it was in the corner of the room turned around with a pillow over it like some tiny amps do, because it just isn't that tiny. Okay, in case you didn't watch the first video I did about this, and by the way, this is on loan to me from Coda Guitars, very kindly. I just thought I'd do a quick explainer of the Trail Rider. So this is a 5 watt amp, as I've mentioned, in a cabinet that's not tiny. It's not champ sized, it is bigger, and it's got a 12-inch speaker. Now, to me, that is one of the biggest differences you can make with a small wattage amp, is put it bigger cabinet and bigger speaker. You see that a lot with things like Lazy J. Now, what this amp is trying to do is recreate the transition in the Tweed amps around 57 when they went from a tone control to, like EQs, treble and bass, which would later become treble, middle and bass. So it does that, which gives you a lot of flexibility. Secondly, it's got reverb, which is fantastic. And thirdly, as I mentioned already, it's got 2 different modes, the T57 and the V67. So these are supposed to be the T, the Tweed, the V, the Vox, the top boost, and they have quite different characters depending on how you play around with the EQ. Then we've got, as I said, the reverb. And I was just checking, that is a reverb tank in there, it's not digital. And then, very importantly, and something we're going to explore a little bit later, it does have an attenuator, which might mean this is one of the most perfect amps I've come across. Now, I wanted to just demonstrate the difference between the V and the T mode in a very obvious way. So we're going to increase both of the tone controls, the treble and bass, up to 3/4 each, because it will just exacerbate some of their characters. So in the V mode, as you increase the treble, you're going to get a lot more chime, which we clearly heard. And as you increase the bass, it actually starts to create more mid-scoop. So we got that quite jangly, very sort of early mid-60s tone. You might have heard it in sort of like pop songs. Even the Beatles were using sort of Vox amps and stuff. I've exacerbated it obviously here to make it very obvious. And then in the T mode, we got a fuller sound, which you would expect from a more Tweed style of an EQ in an amp. Okay, although we're going to come back to a Strat later in the video, I want to see what the amp does with, say, a fuzz and other pedals like that. At this point, I really wanted to pick up a Les Paul and see what would happen with a bit of gain. Now, very helpfully in the manual for this amp, there are some suggested settings, and one of them caught my eye straight away. So I'm not kidding if I'd say I would possibly buy this amp just for this sound. I just absolutely love it. Obviously, as an English person, British blues is some of my favourite, you know, guitar playing, guitar tones out there. And those guys would often just turn up with whatever amp, whether it was a Vox or a Marshall, and just crank it all the way up. And you can hear that in so many old recordings where there's so much feedback and where it feels like the amp is sagging as much as it can and the transformers are about to blow up. But this small amp manages to give us that reasonable amount of breakup and that sort of top end roll off and that lovely dynamic gain sound. It's just magic to me. So it's in the Vox setting and there's no reverb there. Let's hear a bit more. Okay, that tone I just absolutely love it. I mean, that's the sort of, it's not really edge of breakup, is it, with that Les Paul? It's slightly over that, but it cleans up as well when you roll back, which is fantastic. And it has really great sustain. Here's another chord where I hold the sustain and you can just hear, for such a small amp, it's just amazing. Now you'll notice I had the dB meter here. I also use that later in the video where I show you how quietly you can play it using the attenuator. And then unfortunately my dB meter seemed to stop working and started beeping at me. So yeah, I couldn't use it for the whole video. So one thing that strikes me about this amp is that it's not a one-trick pony at all. You know, a lot of 5-watt amps you might think are just going to do the sort of big broken up, or not big, but small broken up recording sound that they're famous for, you know, and yet with this, Carr have thrown in so much and done it so well. So I thought I'd quickly show you a setting that's almost completely the opposite of what we just played. Now it's called Echo Canyon, so you can sort of imagine, but it's a clean echoey tone with lots of reverb, and I just picked up my one of my Telecasters to do this. Now, you know, this is not a sort of demo of any great note, but it's just me playing around with this big echoey sound and having a bit of fun. Okay, in a minute, we're going to get to the part where I show you how quietly this amp can go. But before then, I thought I'd show you what it can do with Pedals. Again, small amps are not supposed to be great with pedals. And this one doesn't know that. So it's pretty good with pedals. Now let's start with a Les Paul. You see I'm trying to say Les Paul. I've had so many people comment, Americans I assume, saying it's not Les Paul because it's not a Lesder Paul, it's Lester Paul. So fair enough. So Les Paul, and now assessing he's calling Dark Horse, which I really like. So let's just hear that by itself. Nice rolled off tone there, pretty moody. Now we'll kick in a Jam Ray. So I'd say it's actually one of my favourite tones I got out of this amp, because by putting the Jam Ray in, it just seemed to just elevate everything, you know, slightly. It's great. Now we'll just put in my Analog Man delay, because again, small amp, sometimes when you add in, you know, delays and things, it all just feels a bit too much for it. Nope. Once again, it's taken it in its stride, and that was great fun to play with. I also wanted to see whether this amp could take a sort of Hendrix style setup, you know, like a fuzz and a univibe, that sort of thing. So I put it into a setting in the Vox mode, a little bit of gain, and let's just hear what that sounds like. Okay, now I'm going to kick in the Haze 67 fuzz. And it sounds massive in the room. You know, the amp takes that really well, and it can clean up as well, which is great. And then after that, I'm now going to hit in the Jan Ray, because that's something I will do with bigger clean amps as well. Just want to see how this works with that. Yeah, I thought that sounded better than with just the fuzz. Again, it gave it a bit more dynamic feel, and you know, it's just great, to be honest. I was quite surprised. And now I'll put in a univibe. I've got the univibe at the beginning of the chain. I'm not really happy with the way it comes across here, so you're only going to hear a few seconds of it. I don't think it's the amp, it's just that I haven't played with a univibe for ages, and I need to play around with the positioning again. So yeah, overall, I'm massively impressed with the way this amp is coping with everything so far, even with pedals, which you just don't expect from a 5-watt amp. You know, it can take your favorite overdrive and get the flavor from that. It can take massive fuzzes. It can take things like delays, and it will take a univibe, just not, didn't sound, you know, like much going on there. Okay, now I think we come to one of the biggest questions I always get about every amp that I put on the channel is, you know, how quietly can you play it? And will it work in, you know, my apartment or my bedroom or whatever. And, you know, we've already seen it can go reasonably loud, like it will go to 104 at its peak. But it's not, there are different types of 104, you know. Like if my 2-rock is at 104, it's going to feel a lot bigger in the room. So you know, decibels are a weird thing. One thing I do know is 3 decibels, I think roughly, is about double the volume. So let's see how low with the attenuator it can go down. One thing that surprised me, which you'll notice, is when you kick the attenuator in but keep the power level on full, that is actually quieter and sounds different than when the attenuator is not in at all. So it's getting kicked in and somehow it's affecting it already, but that just is what it is. Okay, still on edge of breakup. Let's do the volume test. So this is without the attenuator activated at all. Okay, now let's activate it, but keep it on. Okay, put it down to 3/4. Okay, half. Okay, on 1/4. So can you play it in your bedroom? Yeah, 100%. You could play this in a room where someone else is working. It can get that quiet. And, you know, attenuators, in the time I've been playing guitar as an adult, you know, I played as a kid a bit, so about 6 years, attenuators in guitars have got, attenuators in guitars? I mean, they have those, it's a volume knob. But attenuators in amps have got better and better. You know, when I had a Tone King Sky King with an Iron Man attenuator in it, that did a pretty good job. But I feel like they've just got better and better. And this one is turning the power down from 5, and I think at the lowest it's going to 1.5. But it's just so quiet, and yet you can still play it like it's a real amp, you know? It's quite amazing. So yeah, if you're wondering whether this could both do your bedroom and a gig, I mean, it can be mic'd up obviously, so it can do any size of gig really in that sense. It can definitely do that, and it can do recording obviously because it makes a noise, but it makes a really good noise. Like it records really well. Then I think that's probably the answer to that. Yeah. So I'm going to give you my final thoughts here, and then there's going to be a bit of fun after that actually with a Les Paul again. I'll get to that in a second. But can this small amp do it all? Can this 5-watt amp do it all? It can do so much. There are some amps that sort of are very focused in what they do, and they are the best at doing that thing, you know, whether it's a 2-rock traditional clean being like the best clean stroke Fender type boutique amp, you know, or some really high gain amp from Friedman or Soldano, you know, doing what they do. I think this amp is, if you want one amp and you need it to also be able to be really quiet, and you don't need like a massive clean sound. I mean, most of us don't, to be honest, then I think this pretty much is one of the best sort of all-round amps I've come across. It feels really lively to play. It doesn't feel boxy at all. It just responds well to everything. It's really dynamic. It's got loads of stuff you can do with it. So many different sounds. One of the most powerful EQ sections I've come across. The attenuator is amazing. It just is cool. And the T and V settings actually do have a difference. I haven't been able to show you all of that. You know, if you move the treble and bass dials around, you can have all sorts of, you know, crazy roll-offs and sort of barky sounds and all sorts. But yeah, this amp, honestly, if you're looking to spend a bit of money on an amp and you want it to do a lot of stuff, and you want something that's going to be reliable, it's well built, this is just a great choice. Yeah, and apologies if you can hear some fan noise in the background. It's pretty hot here. Okay, there is one setting I wanted to play off with at the end here and have a bit of fun, and it's called full wide open, I think, or wide full open, one or the other. So basically it's all wide open, right? It's the highest gain sound it will do. So you're going to hear it on the Les Paul, then you're going to hear it with the attenuator on half power, so you can hear that, and then you're going to hear me do a bit of rolling the volume down to see if it cleans up, because I was interested to know with this amp whether when it's got its full gain and then you roll back your volume, you can get it clean or not. So carry on watching to find out about that. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and yeah, next week you will see the second part of my trip to ATB guitars. Cool, have a good one. Attenuate that by about half just to hear how well it stands up. On the neck as well. Not bad. 6 and 5.